Welcome to the Hacking Your Health podcast with Ben Canning and Dave Kennedy. Two guys heading out to hack body, mind, business, and beyond. We are here to provide a single source, bullshit-free guide to understanding your body and how you can live better for longer.
It's Dave Kennedy or Hacking Dave from the Hacking Your Health podcast. Just want to say, if you enjoy what we're doing here, what you're listening to, please share us. We're all over Instagram, Discord, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. Check us out at HTTPS wehack.health, as well as our Discord server, which is discord.gg/wehackhealth. Pretty much everything is wehackhealth. But thanks again for all the support, all of the stories that you're sharing. Share your successes, your struggles. That's what this community is here is for. That's why we do this podcast, and your energy supports us. So thank you so much, and hope you enjoy the podcast.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. I'm Ben Canning.
I'm Dave Kennedy.
I'm James Sutton.
And this is Hacking Your Health podcast. So we have a guest that we have, I guess we've been talking about getting you on for a while, and I think timing-wise, we probably just thought this was the right time to do it. So welcome. I'm going to give it to you first to sort of introduce yourself, your background, who you are, and what you've got going on.
Yeah. Well, I'm an online coach and educator. Been in the game for 15, 16 years. Older than a lot of probably the coaches in the industry at the moment in terms of the duration I've been in the game. The amount of coaches that seem to be 18, 19, 20 is insane. So now I've been in the game for a while, done a fair bit of education myself in the early days. And probably for the last 8 years, been an educator through M10 Fitness initially under Mark Coles, worked alongside him for a good fair few years, 6-7 years there. Left M10, joined up with your old coach Callum Raystrick and the Muscle Mentors. Had a good few years working on there and just delivered education, delivered coaching under that brand. And then Muscle Mentors went their own ways and then set up the PT project with my business partner now, Paul Sandell, where we deliver exercise mechanics-based education on the education front. And then I coach guys like yourself who've been in great shape before, but lost their way because business has taken over and they just want to get their physique back to where it should be.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I'll always remember the first time I walked into M10, and I've told this story many times, and it was like, you're greeted with these enormous guys, like tall and jacked dudes, like there's no hiding from it. And I'm like, holy shit, where am I? And that's always what sort of wanted me to get bigger, was seeing these big guys. It's almost like demanding a presence as soon as you walked in. So I guess that was 7 years ago, maybe just bang on exactly 7 years ago, because the first one I went to was a business one before the gym actually opened. So probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And I remember from that. And it's funny you mentioned the exercise mechanics. Dave has been getting some shit on Twitter about some of his movements. So I think we'll delve a bit further into that in terms of like unsolicited advice from the internet as well.
I hate, one of my biggest pet peeves in life is unsolicited advice about form. I'm like, listen, I got a trainer, I got a coach, like I'm sending him my stuff I don't need. And they're always like 99% wrong, so unsolicited form feedback, don't do it. Don't do it.
But isn't just the gym one of those things that if you've trained as a teenager, you know what you're doing. So when you're 30, when you're 40, when you're 50, you can give advice. Like I trained when I was 18. I know what I'm doing. You might not train for 20 years, but you still feel like you can just hand out advice to anyone who's in the gym.
Yes.
I think that's the case.
Yeah, for sure. Well, James, you also train trainers, right? That's kind of your big thing. And so how's that working with people that already have a good level of success in their health and fitness and kind of taking it to the next level? How's that work?
I think there's the understanding that whatever level we're at, we need some extra support. We need some extra accountability. We might need a top up on education, on knowledge. If it was the fact that coaches were redundant, no professional athlete would have a coach. We know they're required in a sense to perform at our best. So the guys and girls that I work with will have been in good shape probably before, but work, business has taken over, and now there's other priorities. Now business or family might be the top priority in their life, but they still want to look good. When they're in their mid-20s, their physique was probably their top priority and business maybe came second. And then they did everything they possibly could to look incredible physique-wise. And then business stroke relationships maybe came under that. But they realized now that's not the case. But they still want to be in incredible shape, but they still need to be held accountable. They still need to have a plan put in place. They still need things mapped out. They still need everything structured. So it's no different from anyone else.
So what you're saying is coaches and trainers are also human as well and need care and feeding and attention.
That is a difficult realization. And I actually remember one time, Louise, this is so funny, one of my clients, Louise, I remember putting a pizza up on Instagram stories and she texted me like, what the fuck, you eat pizza? And I was like, yeah. And she was like an actual human? I'm like, yeah. She's like, what, mind blown? But I think
it's not just chicken, broccoli, and rice all day long in protein shakes.
So that's you. You're the chicken, broccoli, rice guy.
I do love chicken, broccoli, rice.
Yeah. Exactly to your point, James, like I was that prime example. Do you know what I mean? Like whenever I was younger, it was easier to spend, I was in the gym working anyway, so it was easier. Like it was easier to spend time. And I think that one of the frustrations and one of the biggest hurdles I had to overcome was I needed a new way to do things. I didn't have the same time available, and I was getting frustrated because I wasn't getting the results that I felt like I could because I had done that previously, but the way that I had done it before didn't work with my new life and my new responsibilities and everything that I needed to do. And I don't know if you remember, but initially whenever we spoke, you asked me about physique goals, and I was like, I don't really have any. Like that's not necessarily what I needed at that time. It was more, I need you to hold me accountable so I can be better for Dave and for everybody else within the client group. And obviously the physique sort of came as a byproduct.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when we push the physique when maybe we're in our 20s, then it compromises the other areas. But you've realized now over these last 6 months or whatever it is that we've been working together, that if it's done appropriately, then it only optimizes the other areas. It complements,
100%,
not complicates. It assists in everything else in your life. And there might be that short little phase if you are having a photo shoot where you start to feel a little bit fatigued and hunger's getting a bit better of you, but it's only a short phase right at the end. The other 90% of the time, that shouldn't be the case at all.
Yeah, and I think one of the, even whenever I did the sort of eyes emoji, whenever you mentioned about the shoot, like I don't know if at that point I had ever thought that I would actually do it, but I think, when we had the conversation about it, ultimately for me, that was a proven a point exercise. It was everybody who comes to me with the excuse of I travel for work, I don't have the time, I have a family, I run a business, blah, 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 all these other excuses. I was like, if I can do this and have all those same excuses or have all those same reasons to have excuses, it's almost like a massive fuck you to all those excuses. That
I know. I was shocked when you text me saying I've traveled how many different countries, how many different trips.
I was shocked. I was just shocked as well.
I can't remember even what the number was, but I was like, "Have you done that much?"
Yeah.
Well, it was actually cool to see Ben go through that process too, because the first week or so, as he starts coming down on calories, and you can tell his mind is being set on, and he's getting himself into gear, and he starts. The funny thing with Ben, one of his biggest things that he starts doing when he's on a cutting phase is he starts watching the Food Network and people making food because he can't eat the food. So he sent me a text message. He must have spent 8 hours a day watching the Food Network just to get him.
That's what I used to get my cardio in. But it's essentially like when I'm eating meals, I'll watch videos of other people eating food, cooking food, down to the point where I actually got to I was watching videos on which method of preparing food was better, not necessarily equipment wise. So there was definitely levels to it at that stage.
But it's good to see him go through that process. And it's funny because you had mentioned, professional athletes needing coaches and assistants as well to, kind of continuously take them to the next level or whatever. And when Ben first told me, he's like, oh, I have another coach that I go to. I'm like, oh, it just seemed weird to me. Like a coach has a coach, but it makes perfect sense. Obviously, we all have different goals, different objectives, holding accountable, and the same things that I needed when I was, in my early stages with Ben, and that I still need today. The accountability aspects, a program that I can be put into place, the challenges of, Ben put me in a cutting phase. And so that's a challenge that I, went forward in and I'm moving forward in. And so all those things are the same things that coaches go with struggles with. I just found that fascinating. I didn't think of it the same way. I was like, oh, coaches are perfect. They eat, they only eat, 2,000 calories a day, and they're hitting all their protein goals, and they're getting their gym in. They don't have anything else other than that, right? And obviously that's not the case. So
if anything, I would say coaches are more messed up than any.
Agree. 100%.
As a whole, they've either for some reason that they're messed up somewhere in their childhood, or they've been self-doubt or negativity or body composition type issues, something like that. Let alone bodybuilders or going down that route, just coaches in a whole. If you look at sometimes the reason as to why they got in the industry, they might seem perfect from the front, but actually when you strip everything back, they're far from that. And they've got more stuff going on than probably you'd ever believe.
Well, I think that's a very valuable point. Like essentially for me, like the first time I ever did a shoot, and it was like funny, JP trained me, coached me for my first ever shoot. But if I think back, like what were my reasons for doing that? And then obviously after that, I got into, oh, maybe I could do this, blah, blah. I want to be an online coach. And it's like my sort of deeper seated reasons for doing that were probably a little bit selfish in a way. And as you said, from, whatever was going on in my head at the time. So I definitely think that, yes, you're absolutely right. Like we may look like we've got our shit together from the front, but whatever's going on back there is definitely not something that you would say has got your shit together. Well, I guess what made you get into the industry? And I always laugh as well because everybody gives you a hard time for how long it's been and what age you are. I don't know how long it's been or what age you are, but you've been around longer than I have. But what sort of
James? First of all, how old are you? Because I'm 40. So how old are you?
I'm coming into 40 next year, so 39 at the moment.
Okay, so I'm older. Yeah. I'm older than you. Okay, good.
So I'll take that. But it's just part of the fitness industry is dominated by people in their early 20s.
Yeah.
So as soon as you start getting 30s, let alone late 30s, stroke nearly 40,
people don't understand how hard it is to put on muscle mass and how hard it is to recover, and the ailments and the bruises and the torn muscles and everything else that comes along. In my 20s, I had a shoulder injury, and next day I'm back, lifting, a certain amount of weight again. In my 30s, my 40s, it's like 3 months later, I'm still having that issue, So
I still got that problem on my shoulder going on.
Yeah, I still got that. But really, like it's been 3 months. Seriously,
Yeah. I remember. I think look back to some of the things I did in my 20s is insane without warming up. I remember one of my colleagues in the gym I was working at as a PT. He was deadlifting and building up, and he got up to like 5 plates doing deadlift. And I was like, I've never tried that. And literally just gave it a go straight off the back, no warm up, straight in with 5 plates, and did it okay. It's just a movement in the sense at that time I'd never done. But it's insane like what your body can tolerate when you're in your 20s.
Oh, yeah.
And the coaches in their 20s will never realize what the guy in his 30s, 40s, 45, something like that, has to experience and has to go through physique wise, because they've got no appreciation for that tolerance of how it changes from 20s through to mid 30s stroke 40s.
Well, I tell you, so a little bit of my background and history, I was pretty much obese pretty much for my entire life and really struggled with weight. There was a period of time though, when I was in the United States Marine Corps where, I was in a structured program, my food was all taken care of, what I ate, when I ate, how I ate, the routines that I did. And I was able to, be, amazingly fit during that period of time. I was, nowhere near from a muscle perspective where I am today, or fitness wise where I'm today. I'm, right now in my 40s is the healthiest and strongest I've ever been in my entire life. But what I recognized back in my 20s is my ability to shave off weight, my ability to get a leaner physique, my ability to recover. All of those things were extremely fast in the 20s. And you can start to see that slowness down as soon as it's almost like as I hit 30, and then it started to progressively get slower as I went along. Right.
Yeah. For me, I noticed literally again, almost as I hit 30, the biggest thing for me wasn't so much a recovery side of stuff and the training aspects, was my joint tolerance. So I think if you come from a background of a high level sport, or if you've done bodybuilding for years and years, or powerlifting, or something where you've had this high levels of stress for 10 years plus, that thing then gets to a point where your body just starts to break down. And all the things that I could do in my 20s, straight late 20s, got to early 30s, I was like, I can't do this shit now. My knees aren't the same, my elbows aren't the same, and I just had to have so much more aware of how I was performing stuff.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like I never really lifted heavily for a long period of time. We had to do mostly cardio, I would say, in the Marines. Running, that type of stuff was big. Pull-ups. I think our PFT, which is our physical fitness test, is like you had to do a minimum of like 3 pull-ups, 100 crunches, and a 3-mile run in 20 or 28 minutes or 30 minutes or something like that. So it was never really that crazy of what we had to accomplish. And I think that actually maybe have helped me later on, because I'm able to really kind of push myself a bit harder now. And what are you doing? 2 screens, Ben?
Sorry, that was a shit show. You did a really good job of like me not being there. You did a really good.
We just kept going. We pretended that you never left. We pretended you never left.
Honestly, fucking hell, like what a shit show. Anyway, I'm back, but yes, continue. Sorry. Sort of.
No, it's just I think that may have helped me a little bit, because right now I'm pushing insane weights now in my 40s. I'm hitting 600-pound deadlifts. I'm able to really kind of exert myself in a way, because my body really isn't that worn down from being a professional athlete. I see a lot of these old folks that are my age that played football as a kid and through college, and they're just a wreck. I mean, their backs, their legs, they're getting surgeries, all this other stuff. So I think the amount of damage and toll we put on our bodies definitely can play really well in the future.
Definitely, I have to agree with that. The higher level of sport you play earlier on, whether it's as a teenager, whether it's early 20s, the more that comes back to bite you in the ass by the time you get to your mid-30s.
Yeah.
If you're someone who just plays recreational type sport and nothing too intense, then that actually puts you in good stead. I think then to continue to be 30-40s and your body to be intact and not to be completely beaten up.
What's crazy here in the States, we have swimming, which is a big sport here. And my nieces and nephews are really good at swimming. Like they've made like nationals and things like that. They're really good at swimming, but their practice routines, like there's no ability for recovery. I mean, they're practicing in the mornings for 2 or 3 hours, and they're practicing for 2 or 3 hours in the evenings every single day. You're talking 6-7 hours of practice of intense, weightlifting, of, swimming. And I mean, at that age, even though you can recover so fast, I mean, I can't imagine that is sustainable for a long period of time. And the damage you're putting into your body long-term could be, pretty great there. So I'm like, I'm just amazed, because I mean, it's literally Monday through Saturday. They're doing it every single day. They get one day to basically relax, but they're up at 5 o'clock in the morning and they're there till, 9 o'clock at night, basically, working out, which is crazy.
Yeah. I think it's crazy though. And I assume a lot of elite level sports, they're still doing stuff that was taught to them 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and new research, new things. It's coming obviously in at a certain level, but there's a lot of the grassroots, or a lot of level where it hasn't come in yet, and has an appreciation for recovery, appreciation for tracking sleep, tracking rest and heart rate, tracking heart rate variability, whatever it may be. That hasn't got into a lot of sport yet. So it's still being taught what was taught 20 years ago. Oh yeah, swimming wise, you have to do an insane amount of volume. Yep. So they run with that same thing.
It's funny because
it's actually interesting.
Sorry
to interrupt you. I think that's an interesting point, and I guess I'll put it to you, James. Like the tracking heart rate variability and all the recovery, the data metrics and stuff like that. Obviously, it's only come along as wearable tech has sort of come, but essentially, I learned how to coach through how you coach, but also how Callum coach. Like so, all those data points, like that's how I learned. So. For you, like when did all that start to come in, or sort of what have you seen as the evolution of coaching itself over the years that you've been coaching?
I think for myself, it's almost gone to a point where it was started off as foundational, obviously, and then started to get more in depth in terms of tracking heart rate variability, tracking deep sleep, tracking latency, whatever, all these more markers. But now it's starting to do a bit of a U-turn. Of actually, we don't need that 1% for the majority of people. If you're elite sport or something like that, then yes, you do need that 1%. But for the majority of people that even I work with who are coaches, they don't need to concern themselves with that. So I'm like, just be consistent at the foundations. Just lock your training in, lock everything consistently there. Let's be even what I was bugging you about this week, Ben. Let's get back to a consistent sleep and wake time.
Yeah.
So the foundations, the basics. Yeah.
You did call me out. You said, I know that you operate on routine when you're better on routine. I was like, I do operate when I'm better on routine. I do need to sort that out. So yeah, but that's again, that's the benefit of me having you as my second set of ears, second set of eyes, just to call me out and say, look, this is what's happening. You need to fucking change this, or it's not going to work out. Essentially.
Yeah.
And see, with HRV and things like that, it's interesting. You mentioned like the foundation of the basics. I mean, just getting good sleep, getting good nutrition, staying consistent with those two, staying consistent with your resistance training or whatever you're doing from a steps perspective. Like the routines are what build the habits that build the success. And, as you start getting more progressive with that, you can start to tweak those and add that 1% that may help you in certain areas or better. Right. I think for me, with Ben specifically, Ben, I thank God I have Ben, because I'd be lifting 7 days a week and doing HIIT training 7 days a week. I would never give my body time to recover. So I'm like 7 days a week to get muscle, right? And Ben's like, you realize you grow muscle in recovery. I'm like, I know, but I feel like I'm taking a day off. It's not worth it. But I do use, technology as a way for me to stay consistent. It's a way of holding me accountable. So if I start to see I use the Whoop band, I start to see with Whoop, if I'm not getting good sleep, for example, and Ben sees that, he's like, hey, your sleep was total shit this week. You need to make sure you get back onto that. What's going on? Are you traveling too much? What's going, start focusing on that, because that's going to help you with the recovery. That's going to help you with other things. Yeah. So, at the end of the day, those routines and data can help you stay consistent. But at the end of the day, that's going to be a 1% type of thing in most cases. If you're going down to that finite detail, like, oh, my HRV was off by 4 points today. I need to address, I'm not getting to that level of detail, but at least, letting me know where I'm at from a state perspective is good.
Yeah, 100%. I don't doubt the value in it, but I went too deep in tracking for a while to know that I got to step back a little bit. And okay, even for the coaches that I'm working with, it was just too much to track over a consistent period of time. And there's obviously individuals who like everything data-wise and they got all the numbers, but a lot of people, that's just too much, too overwhelming.
Yeah.
And stuff. And then it's knowing, okay, when do we need to go and look at that? But day to day, it's not doing that all the time. It's knowing when to pull from that and when to actually push in and utilize that data.
Yeah, I think, again, that's a pretty good point. Like, it's about having the tools and knowing when to use them. And it depends. Essentially, with everything that you ever get asked, it's like, yeah, okay, do we need to use it? It depends on the situation, it depends on the person, it depends on the time, it depends on the phase, it depends on everything else that you have going on. So it's good to know that those tools are there, but not to almost overwhelm the client, overwhelm the person with like all these numbers and data at the start whenever, they just need to track their food and have a decent wake time and sleep time, as you said.
Yeah. I don't know, Ben, if you want me to go back and answer your initial question about getting into the industry.
Yes.
we went on a tangent there and never actually covered that. So for me, it was almost like there wasn't any other career to go in a sense. I'd gone and tried to pursue a career of professional basketball. I'd gone down the route of playing semi-professional basketball.
I'm liking you better now, James. I'm a huge basketball fan, so and played basketball. So
trying to pursue a career of semi-professional or professional basketball in the UK isn't happening. The money they pay out is just to Americans and stuff. So I did a bit of coaching to stick over and wasn't really going anywhere. Decided to qualify as a PT because I'd never really had a proper job. Worked in Domino's, worked at things, going through like doing a bit of studying and stuff, but then did a couple of years of trying to play basketball. Wasn't happening. I thought, what am I going to do with my life? Try and become a PT. And then literally as I was becoming a PT, 2 days before I was meant to start personal training, playing basketball, dislocated my knee.
Oh.
So any hope of continuing with basketball was thrown out. was meant to start PTing, but obviously couldn't walk when I was in a full brace. So PT was pushed back 4 or 5 months or so. And then obviously got into PT and never looked back from there. But I almost got to a point where even though I was playing basketball, I was enjoying training and the gym side of stuff at a point more than the basketball. Because it got to a point where I was 6'7" for anyone who's listening and obviously isn't going to be aware of
you're tall as well. Good.
We all look the same.
Yeah. So you're on the tallest. I'm 6'4". Ben is, I think, 6'3".
Ish. Yeah.
6'2".
Funny story. The first time I went over to meet Dave, he was like, to sort of backtrack, Dave has a cardboard cutout of me from my first ever shoot. Now, it was meant to be full size, but it's a little bit shorter. And I was getting messages like, honestly, dude, like, if you're not tall, I'm just going to drive past him. I'm not going to pick you up. I'm not going to pick you up. I don't think he could have handled a short Ben.
Yeah, I would be able to handle short Ben. So I'm glad to hear it's all as well, James.
Sorry, derailed. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like for me, I was growing up in school as a teenager, close to 6, 7 sort of mark, and obviously just felt but wasn't confident. There's like self-confidence there, and got into the gym from almost a negative point. But then a lot of people then take that, well, yeah, I got into the gym because I wasn't confident and because I wasn't happy with my physique. Whereas it doesn't have to stay that way, but that's in a sense what took me into coaching and into personal training. But if I hadn't had that self-doubt in terms of where I was at and wanting to be bigger and not liking my body shape, not liking who I was, then I wouldn't have had the career I do now. Yep. So that led to a massive positive on that side. But yeah, I got into sort of that in terms of training through basketball and wanting to be bigger because I was playing against adults and people older as, and then obviously then that led into the gym side of stuff as well, which led into PT.
Good. And then you start like obviously gym floor, like commercial gym, or what way did that go for you to start?
So I actually went for a few like different jobs like we all do in the early days. Went for a couple of gym instructor ones and got turned down. No, sorry, went for a couple of PT ones. I got turned down and said I need to get some gym instructor experience first before I can be a PT. Then managed to go to an LA Fitness, and the manager for the regional LA Fitness just there was Mark Coles. People aren't going to know who he is, but he'll come up in a story in a second. So this guy called Mark Coles interviewed me for the job, started working at LA Fitness, where you just basically have to pay rent. You're chucked in the gym. You said you give me some guidance, but you've got to pay rent and then just try and find clients yourself. Worked in there for a good 6 years or so, managed to survive, managed to get clients. And then this Mark Coles guy, who had obviously initially employed me, always would see him on courses. We'd go out to Sweden and study with this guy called Charles Poliquin and stuff. We'd do courses with him and he'd be there as well. And we catch up and chat. And then after a few years, realized he was opening his own gym. And then it's like, oh, do you want to come and work for me? So went from a commercial gym for 6 years or so to then go and work with Mark Coles in this gym called M10, 6 years or so there. And that's when I started getting in front of other coaches. Because he started running educational camps and stuff like that. And I was his sort of right-hand man in the early days because I was one of the first guys with experience to join the M10 team. So I helped Mark a lot build the courses, build the education program and stuff there. And initially was the thought behind the scenes, but then started to get to a point where he pushed me out there in a sense to start teaching it and get in front of people and teach the education side of stuff as well.
How did you find that transition? And this is a selfish question for me, because obviously, you know, what I'm doing with the new sort of group-based program is I'm trying to make it a lot around education. And yes, okay, it's digitally, it's virtually, but with the hope to do it sort of in person. So how did you find that? Like, for me, speaking in front of people is my worst nightmare. So how did you find that sort of transition from going from like sort of PT coach educator?
I think I enjoyed the transition. I enjoyed the challenge because even for myself as well as someone growing up, that if you put me in assembly or in front of the class or something like that, again, it would have been my worst nightmare. But when I was confident on the topic I'm talking about, then it's a different story. When I was confident in my physique and everything and me as a person, then it's a different story than being a teenager. So it took a while to, I think, really show that confidence in how I was teaching and how it's presented, and I think if I hadn't had maybe Mark there to push me in front of people in a sense, then I probably maybe would have stayed in my shell a little bit and not got out there and not done the presenting and the teaching side of stuff. So yeah, it definitely took a while to really feel comfortable with it. But I think like anyone, if the more you know your subject area, the more you know your topic, the more in itself that is going to breed confidence in just talking about it. And then it's just doing it. The more you do it, the more you speak to people, the more you do podcasts, the more you do lives, the more you do education, whatever it is, the more comfortable you feel at that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Dave speaks in front of thousands people. So, I mean, he gets it.
Just a few thousand. No big deal.
Is that a few thousand live, face to face, or virtually in a sense online?
All of the above. I've spoken in front of I think my record was 8,000 people in an arena, and then I also I do news, so I do like national news. So I'll be on like CNN, MSNBC, BBC, Fox, and I will speak to national news as well, which is an interesting one because, you don't see the people, but there's millions of people watching. So if you say something stupid, you obviously get the payback of what that means if you say something stupid. But I luckily I get to speak to
I always think
folks.
the virtual one's easier because you're just speaking to one or two people in a sense.
So,
even if it's live, there might be 100, 200 or thousands in your case, people there, but you don't see them. And so I always find that little bit easier.
So I feel like for the news, that's accurate because I'm only looking at like a screen and, I'm listening to the anchor in the ear. So it's only kind of like a one-on-one dialogue, which seems very comfortable. But I do find if I'm presenting, like, let's just say on like a live conference online, I have a tough time with that because I can't read energy. I can't use the energy of the people to feed me back, to keep me going. So I really rely off of the audience energy, facial expressions, looking people directly in the eye, kind of the natural behavior that we have as human beings of socializing and talking in group quorums and things like that. That really feeds back to me to give, kind of the best presentation. I was finding over COVID, where live conferences, online became, the norm. I found that it was just like going through the ropes and I was just sluggish and it wasn't exciting. And it wasn't the same type of feel that I would give if I was going out there. And I also found conversely, when I went back to doing live presentations, I was rusty because, I hadn't done it for 2 years and I was more nervous, and so it took me a little bit, used to getting back to talking to people in person and that type of stuff as well. So it's amazing how fast things can go one way or the other, very similarly to like health can go one way or the other very quickly, in your fitness journey too.
Yeah, I think that for me, like just what you're saying there, for me, video was always my worst nightmare. I started with doing video check-ins, and to your point, James, like it's easy because essentially I'm only really talking to one person's only ever going to see it, and then you do videos on Instagram or whatever, and then it sort of builds and builds and builds from that. But the podcast has obviously helped with that. But we did a Twitter Spaces one time, and it was funny because obviously in this situation I can see Dave or whoever else is there, but on Spaces it was like we were both talking, we were both on it, but I couldn't see anything. It was because it was just audio. And that same sort of point, I was like, I have no idea. Number one, is there anybody there? Number two, how anybody's taking any of this stuff. So it was difficult to sort of gauge the response of people for sure.
Oh, 100% agree that if it's a presentation where you're trying to get feedback in terms, or you're getting people to comment in the messages or something like that, then that's so hard virtually. Whereas if you're doing that face to face, you're doing that live, then that is so much easier when you can get feedback of other people. Oh yeah, is this sticking? Yeah. Oh, they got this. Okay, I can move on now. Oh no, they're looking confused and so that I got to repeat that. We talk about it in a different way, whatever maybe. But trying to do that on a Zoom group call type thing is so hard.
Yeah. Well, so parlaying into that. So James, you obviously deal with a lot of trainers. You deal with folks that are different parts of their lives from just starting off all the way to some of the most advanced. What are some consistent struggles that you see with all of your your clients that are good lessons for folks that maybe are just starting off or are midway through their journey that allow them to continue to be successful as they grow? Because I think the biggest thing for me is I'm finding I'm starting different journeys all the time. Whether that's going to a different level of muscle mass, or that's going through a bulking and cutting phase, or whether that's homing in on my nutrition or my sleep. So I'm learning new things all the time, and I have different struggles with those new things too. So what do you think is some of the hardest challenges that most folks face aside from life, I guess? Yeah.
I think the first thing that comes to my mind on that is the struggle post diet, shoot, holiday prep, whatever it is. Everyone thinks, okay, the dieting's hard. Like, no, the dieting's easy. Like, not everyone, but the huge percentage of people have performed some form of diet and succeeded at it. Like, maybe not to the level we've been at, but then even the guys that I've worked with, they've probably, I don't know, competed before, or done a photo shoot before, or done some form of diet before. So that's the easy part. The hard part is, okay, now how are we going to maintain that? How are we going to keep your head in the game to make sure you've got some focus or clarity or structure or plan in place post holiday photo shoot, whatever it is, dieting phase? That's the biggest struggle for the majority of people that I would see, that they've been in shape before at some point, but okay, now let's get you in shape again. Maybe let's get you in better shape than you've ever been, but knowing how much can we push without compromising the back end? How much can we push without messing up your hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin, the things that manage how hungry you are, how satisfied you are? If we push too hard, you're going to come out the back end of the diet and you could eat 2,500 calories or 4,500 calories and your hunger levels are not going to be any different at all. Your body is not going to register that 4,500 is any different from 2,500. So I think the biggest struggle for me with people is deciding how hard to push someone to make sure, one, they can get in shape, but two, how they're going to hold something post-shoot, post-diet, whatever that post-dieting phase is. That's the first thing that comes to mind. The second thing that comes to mind with the type of clientele that I work with now, which is in a sense very similar for Ben, is that as life gets more complex, as business expands, as business grows, you're trying to do more and more, but you just can't recover from it. So really have an idea of how can you optimize and manage stress. How can you try and lock in a consistent routine so sleep's at least dialed in and stuff like that.
And that sounds very similar to a struggle with someone that's first starting off as well. Very same struggle, just different, I guess, mechanisms of doing it. Someone that's experienced versus not. A lot of times that we hear from folks,
the person starting off, in a sense, is in a better place from a training perspective because they're not training hard. They might think they are, but they're not really training hard. Whereas the person who's experienced, training's the stress now. Whereas in the early days, training isn't that stress. But as soon as we get into it, and you said 600 pounds on your deadlift, that's a stress on the body. If you're starting out and you're doing 50-pound deadlift, that's not a stress on the body in that same way. So that there's more when you add family, when you add work, when you add business, when you add other things in there, there's more stress going on for that experienced person because of how potentially sort of stressful training itself can be. So there's sometimes more to consider than in the early days.
Yeah, and I think it's to go back to your first point, because I'm like, that is me at the minute. You know what I mean? We're, I guess, coming up in 3 or 4 weeks post shoot, but obviously we had a plan after the shoot that we would do a maintenance phase and then we would move into surplus, and then Martin Irvine threw a spanner in the works by saying to do another shoot. And I genuinely felt a bit lost in that sort of change of goal, because for so long I was like, right, I'm going to make it to this point, and then this is what we're going to do, and this is the time frame, and I no longer. And then obviously I had travel in the middle, and travel had obviously been fine up until the point where I was doing the shoot because I had that sort of end goal. But then after that, I was like, well, how long am I doing this for? What direction am I going? What am I actually doing? And that same sort of thing. It's just I got a little bit lost. And I said this to you on Monday. I think I was like, I just need just tell me what direction I'm going in, and I can just dial into that, and that's all that I really need. And it's, I've been down that rabbit hole post whatever it is many times before, and luckily I'm not at that same point now.
Yeah, and you won't know it's a struggle. You won't appreciate how hard it is after the diet until you've dieted hard, until you've been there. You're like, no, that's going to be easy. How can I not manage my hunger when I'm on more food? I'm on 500, 1,000 extra calories. How can I not manage hunger now? How can you feel lost in terms of where you're going? And until you've been there, you won't realize that it is harder than the actual prep itself or the dieting phase itself.
Well, I think what I'm hearing from both of you is that having a plan to execute on and sticking to that plan is probably one of the most important things. And having somebody like a coach that can be there to see what your struggles are, what your timeframes are, and being able to take an outside view and build something around that leads to a lot of success. I think where a lot of people fail, and that I've seen a lot of people fail, is when they don't have a coach, either through financial means, or they don't see the purpose of it, or they don't stick with the coach, long periods of time. They start to deviate from those, and then life starts taking over, and it doesn't become a priority anymore. And it doesn't mean that fitness has to be the number one priority in your life, but it still has to be a part of your life that you are continuously focusing on trying to improve yourself, your health, longevity, goals, whatever that is. And it's funny because when I first started off with Ben, Aaron was like, hey, how long do you think you're going to stick with Ben? I'm like, I don't know, maybe we'll just try this 6 months or whatever, and I'm 2.5 years in, and I can't imagine not having a coach or not having Ben as a coach. So, it's one of those things where, if Aaron were asking me that same question today, I'd be like, I don't know, forever, because I like having somebody that holds me accountable, understands what I'm under. Like if I have just a really crummy 2 weeks where I'm just traveling a ton, Ben will be there. Okay, we got 2 weeks. Here's how we're going to plan this out. Here's what we're going to do. So I have a plan in place always that is with my chaotic life. Being able to have somebody that looks outside in and keep you planned has been monumental from my success perspective. And I think that's and when I do different things, new things that I haven't done before, or I'm pushing myself in different methods. You mentioned the diet. If I'm pushing myself on calories that I've never done before, having somebody as a bouncing board, or, hey, I'm not seeing the results that I need to, so let's push it harder, or whatever that ends up meaning, having somebody that can say, hey, he can handle getting pushed a little bit harder, or he can handle doing this a little bit differently. That's, I think, speaks for itself on the success around that and what trainers actually provide or coaches provide.
Yeah, and just to add to that as well, though, definitely like having the support, having the plan, having that structure, having everything in place. But a couple of points on top of that is having goals that are bigger than just a little 6 week, 12 weeks. Like, so that keeps you on it rather than thinking, okay, I'll do this little 6 week diet and then I'm done. No, it's like having something that's a little bit longer term.
Yep.
But then also is thinking, okay, how can these goals complement the other areas of your life? How can we try and make sure that, okay, you getting in shape means that your business is more productive, or you're more present with your family, or whatever's important to you in life, it assists with that rather than purely just the aesthetic. Yes, we know the aesthetic is going to be the driver, and in a sense, from a coaching perspective, that's what's going to pull people in. That's what's going to create that front end sale. But on the back end, we've got to make sure that people are feeling better day to day, not just shredded, but they actually got more energy. They feel better. Yeah. And that's going to keep them in line and keep them in place. So, Dave, that if you were to eat shit and go back to, you said you're overweight in previous years, and go back to that, you wouldn't have the same energy you do now. Your digestion would feel crummy, or your recovery would feel off and stuff like that. So It's all them feelings, there's the soft stuff in a sense, which keep you in. That sometimes that they need reiterating. Yes, we're working towards this long-term goal, but actually it's being in shape is helping these other areas of your life as well.
Yep. And you had mentioned, the 6 week diets as kind of a thing that a lot of people home in on. And, you always hear New Year's resolutions and, I'm going to go to the gym, 10 times a week, and I'm going to go at 4:00 in the morning, and I'm going to eat 200 calories a day. You're obviously dealing with, I think, a little bit of folks that probably have a better understanding and grapple on nutrition and things to that effect. But, to me, I think the message that is portrayed out there to the general masses is that, hey, you need to do this fad diet, this cleanse for 30 days, to get you clean. And then from there, you're somehow going to magically keep all that weight off. And, what we see from a struggling, especially in the United States, obesity is, one of the leading causes of cardiovascular and cancer diseases here. We have a pandemic going on here just from an obesity perspective. But, people will have some success with like ketogenic diets. I'm not saying keto is not a thing, but, but if you're using keto as a weight loss tool and then you come off of keto and you gain that 30 pounds back, did it really work? What's your take on kind of the fitness industry and what's sustainable versus what's not? Do you need to eat just chicken and rice all day long, or what's the framework that you kind of attest to that you've seen a lot of success with people, or is it the fad diets that you have to do 60 days without eating anything and you're only drinking ginger water and turmeric? So
So we joke about the fad diets, but I don't know if you look back, Ben, how many you've tried, but you name it, and I've probably almost tried that at some point during my career in the past. Keto, I've been there.
Same here.
Cleanses of a form, I've been there. Charles Poliquin, he was an educator in the past, and he taught cleanses. It's a 7-day cleanse where you just had these sort of liquid shakes and stuff, like different things I've done. So I've played at it, but it comes down to if you can't stick with something, or if you can't envision yourself sticking with something for years to come, then you're never going to maintain it. But on the other side, there's nothing wrong with that period going, okay, I'm just going to really clean this up. Like myself this summer, I went through a little dieting period. I thought, I haven't dieted now for 2.5, 3 years sort of properly. Let me just see what I can do in 6-8 weeks. I don't intend to continue to do that. Like I will sit at 12%-ish body fat and be happy and comfortable there. But I was like, let me see where I can get to. Let's get back to a 6% random sort of mark. And the things I implemented then, I won't stick to day to day. I pulled down in the week down to 1,600 calories because then at the weekend I can have some flexibility. I'm not going to eat 1,600 calories day to day. I'm not going to maintain that. So yes and no, that like, yes, we don't want to implement aggressive protocols for someone who's not consistent and done the foundation and the basics.
Right.
But actually, when you're at a point where you consistently train in, you know what quote unquote good, clean food is, your recovery is generally on point. No, we can do that for 6-8 weeks. We can strip it back.
Because you have the ability to come off of that into a solid foundation.
Because you know where baseline is.
Right.
Like you're going to comfortably sit at whatever it is, 12, 15%, and you're happy there and you know where that baseline is. And if we want to pull the pin and push it for a little bit, we'll do that. But then your body's going to go back up. But you're not using that to think that that's going to change your life. You know that you're going to come back up after it. You know you're not going to hold this new low.
I think that's something that in the past sort of 6 months, whatever long we've been working together, is that I've changed my mindset on. It's knowing that sometimes you have to do things that aren't sustainable, essentially. And I would have always been in that, no, we have to do this. I can't go below a certain calorie amount because that's what everybody else does and fuck the industry and blah, 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 blah. But it's like almost like, as you said, whenever you get to a point where, you have a baseline, it's just manipulating the numbers, and having a time frame on it, I think, is essential. So if, whenever we went down to 1,600, it was like, all right, we're going to do this for 4 weeks because of this. I'm like, okay, I can tune into that. Whereas if you went, right, we're going to go to 1,600 calories in a finished sentence, I would have been like, well, like, what do you mean? Like, I can't do that forever. But it's knowing that there's something sort of at the other side of it or down the line. And I think that, I don't know, I assume that probably my clients have realized that too, like, was something that's definitely changed here over the past 6 months. But it's knowing that, it's almost like knowing that you can do it and knowing that it's an additional tool, but also getting an understanding of you as a person or them as a client to know what their limitations are and have an understanding of that at the same time.
Yeah, it's 100% understanding when to suggest something like that. It's not a client signs up day one, okay, let's go 1,600 calories. No, that's the wrong approach. Completely. No, a client signs up day one, let's just track what you're having.
Yeah.
Like, that's no different from my clients compared to your clients, Ben. It's like, let's just figure out where you're at, where's baseline. And even when someone starts tracking, we know that's going to be lower than what they're actually having, because now they're aware of what they're having. So they stop having that little bit of chocolate or that extra biscuit here or there, whatever it is. And that straight away brings numbers down on that side.
I think you are validating how important it is to have somebody around you that understands those concepts, like, instead, it's like anything that you're learning in life. Like, did I become an awesome security person overnight? No, I read books from people that, were knowledgeable. I went to professors, I went to school, I did hands-on, I learned from other people to become, a practitioner in my own industry. I shouldn't expect the same thing for my health and fitness. I didn't understand my body. I didn't understand total daily energy expenditure, calories in versus calories out. I didn't understand macro and micronutrients. I didn't understand all these concepts that, you guys, consider very basic as far as, concepts, but most people don't even understand how their bodies work. And you're just laying out how important it is to have that knowledge, whether you study your ass off to learn it, or you have somebody around you that can say, hey, you're not making progress fast enough of where you want to go. So let's tweak this a little bit and do something a little bit different. Or, here's how you should be doing a lift instead of this way from a muscle perspective, or, hitting your muscles a bit differently, or we're going to focus this way or that way. So, it just emphasizes the importance of having a coach, somebody there that can help you, guide you, and steer you along, that is more knowledgeable in areas that you're not.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Great. And just to sort of like segue into what you're talking about, the form and exercise execution, because we all know that the internet, the power of the internet, and obviously a big focus for you, James, is biomechanics and how people move. So number one, what led you down that path? And number two, like, how do you see the importance of that for sort of like people across the board?
And real quick, before James gets into that, it's just part of this as well. So a good concept of why not to listen to what you see in kind of fad news and things like that. So I pulled the headliner from insider.com, which talks about The Rock's eccentric exercise that he does, right? And he focuses very much on eccentric exercises as part of it. And And so there was a study that came out of Edith Cohen University that eccentric or time under tension as you're going downward on a motion versus picking up has the most amount of ability to put on muscle mass, which, if you use tempo or use other ways of doing muscle contractions, that's going to be a great thing for you. A lot of people are just jamming through those sets and they're, losing a lot of gains that could potentially be getting there. But the first thing that it starts off with, and if you don't understand weightlifting, you don't understand muscle hypertrophy, you don't understand rep ranges, you don't understand short twitch versus fast twitch fibers, the first thing it says is don't focus on lifting weights, just focus on lowering them, and that will help you build muscle. That's what it leads off with. And you're like, so if I read that, so you're basically saying if I just put things down, I'm going to increase my muscle mass as part, and it totally destroys all of the science behind lifting weights, right? And so, let's talk about muscle mass and eccentric lifting and hitting things in the right way, because I think that's a big confusion area for a lot of people.
I think just that goes line in line with Ben also mentioned about what is exercise mechanics, the key thing that I teach, and the key, whether it's exercise mechanics, biomechanics, whatever necessary term you look at, it's really just understanding what's going on as we train, understanding what's going on with forces, understanding what's going on with anatomy. Because we give exercise these names, we give it terminology, we give it generic rules, and we give it, let's say there's things that the Rock does that, we've got to follow that, or whatever, or things. And it's all just generic terms, whereas actually when we break it down, we can say it's simple, but only when you know what is going on. But it's all down to really how forces are applied to anatomy. And whether that's a bench press, whether that's a deadlift, whether that's a hack squat, whether it's a plyometric, on each one of them, there's forces being applied to anatomy. And when we can actually start to understand what's going on with the tools we're maybe using, dumbbells, barbells, machines, leg presses, whatever that is, and also understand what's going on internally with ourselves, then we can know then how to apply that to clients and get the best results. And in our 20s, probably doesn't matter. Our joint tolerance is high. We haven't got any niggles, lower back's okay, knees okay, there's no injuries at all. Lift what you want, do what you want, watch what Arnie did when he was in his 20s and follow that. But it comes a point in time when things start to break down. There comes a point in time when I'm developing my anterior delt, but this just chest isn't really growing. Or I've got no glutes, but my quads look jacked. Well, why is that? It's not the case that you need to do more squats or more bench press or do more of what you're doing. It's a case of, okay, well, let's have an understanding of your structure as a person. Let's look at what movements you're performing, how you're performing them. I think, can things be tweaked and optimized to work more chest than anterior delt, to work more glutes than quads? For majority of people, yes, they can. The body's always going to have a bit of a bias to hit certain areas, but a lot of times that can be tweaked, that can be adjusted. Or maybe you feel your knee when you perform squats, because squats are the king exercise, so you've got to do that. They're like, no, we don't need to. If we need to build our quads, we just need to work through knee extension. That can be done on a leg extension. That can be done on a leg press. That can be done via a step up. Okay, so what are the movements create knee extension? Which ones maybe feel better on the knee? Which ones can we play with alignment? Can we play with setup? Can we play with tempo to try and make sure we can work that knee extension, work that quad and get the most from it? But if we don't have an understanding of what's going on, we just give exercises the names. And we say, this exercise is good, this exercise is bad. This is the key one you've got to do to build your legs. This is the one you should never do, like that. Whereas actually it's not about good or bad. It's just about understanding of what that exercise gives us and what's appropriate for ourselves or what's appropriate for our clients. And this studying of exercise mechanics, the studying of biomechanics thing gives us that appreciation, gives that understanding. So we're not just doing a generic squat, bench, deadlift that we could do when we're 18, but now we get to a point where it just doesn't quite feel right. And so we have to have more of an educated approach around how we train and what we do from a training perspective. So it gives us the ability to potentially still build muscle, but it's more the fun that actually when we get to a point where we're not going to continue to build muscle, we're going to just hold and stabilize where we're at.
I think
I don't know if you're still building muscle now, Dave, but if you are at 40 odd, you're doing well, you're in good shape.
I'm doing good. I'm definitely still building muscle.
There'll come at a point in time where you're not going to continue to build muscle, but within a good understanding of what you're doing, you're not going to lose it.
James, I hope that never happens, by the way. But yeah, I want to continue to build muscle as long as I can.
But everyone else out there is from the age of 25 is they're dropping tissue.
Yeah.
So if we're someone who's been in great shape and 30 years onwards we're holding tissue, then we're still progressing because everyone else is going backwards.
Yep. Well, I think the ability to change your movements and exercises for your body and what your body needs is so important. So like one of the things that I really appreciate about Ben is, he gets, weekly check-in photos, sees where I'm at from a progress perspective, and my training changes based off of that. So, just this last training area, my chest was not as well developed, although my arms and shoulders were starting to become developed. So we focus more, on chest, but I also have exercises of movements because I have a lingering, right shoulder issue to where, we have different movements that work around that. So instead of me doing normal barbell bench presses, that would typically injure my shoulder, I'm using more of a neutral grip bar, and I still hit, I'm not as able to do as heavy, which is kind of a pride hit thing, but I'm able to get a good contraction of my muscles in my chest. And that was very much able to alleviate and build up my chest more so because of those customized training programs and hitting my muscles in different ways. And I think that's really important is, the goals that you want to accomplish with your physique or your form or your ailments that you have as you age, or doing things more safely. Like I prefer doing a belt squat now, which, lowers less tension on my back. I still do squats, but I usually do more so on a wedge that allows me to hit more quad isolation and less tension on my back. But, those are the things that, I've adjusted accordingly based on my age with the help of Ben to make sure that I'm hitting things the right way and proper way, form, improving on form continuously, all that good stuff, right?
Yeah, the study of exercise mechanics is just understanding all the things you talk about there is straight away visualizing, okay, that heel wedge has done this. That's allowed your knees to travel forward a little bit. So your torso is a bit more upright, so reduce the stress on your back. So even as you discussing that, I can visualize what Ben and Sen has implemented and done, rather than just you've done this exercise where everyone has to do that exercise to assist their back. Whatever. Yep.
Especially the deadlifts, right? Everybody's got to do traditional deadlifts.
That's exactly the point with the people, who are trolling you like on the internet. It's like, okay, maybe that does work well for you, but you don't have an understanding of how Dave moves, like, or, what we've done or why we're doing things a specific way. And I think that's essentially where the problem comes in.
Yeah, like the critique I got last time is I was doing a 1,000-pound leg press and I'm 6'4". So my legs are extremely long and they only go back a certain amount of range. My range of motion, as soon as I go back, I'd either have to kick my back out, which I have lower right back issues, so putting a lot of strain on the lower right back, or I, essentially murder my legs in a negative way because they don't go back far enough. So I'm doing full range of motion as I'm doing it, but the person's like, hey, you need to go deeper in those and come back. I'm like, you don't understand my body or my height or my ailments or anything like that. And that's actually not the case. I'm creating constant, time under tension, contraction of my muscles. I'm hitting the quads as I should be. My foot placement's great. It's under control. I disagree, right? And, that obviously starts, you can't disagree with anybody anymore. So that's a big thing. But the unsolicited forward feedback's definitely one of my biggest pet peeves. You don't understand. You don't understand what a person's doing to negate that, right? Negate an ailment or hit things in a different way or how their body's designed to work. We're all very different in how we operate.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
I think you're right though, and that's what it comes down to. And there's so many other factors that come into play with it. And I'm reluctant to get into that argument with someone on the internet as well, especially on Twitter, because I don't have enough characters to actually respond. So it can be quite difficult, but I think that knowing that we're doing what's right for you and you're in a good place with it and we're not causing any further injuries is essentially what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And the key thing you said, Ben, there as well, is doing what's right for you. And the people obviously taking the mick out of what you're doing or going at you, they don't understand you as a person. And every one of us is different, and that's where every one of us should perform slightly different movements or perform them in a slightly different way or something. That everything should be tweaked for the individual as well. So there's a key thing when you don't have an appreciation of what exercise really is, I think everyone's got to do these same movements in the same way, in the same range, with the same load, whatever. Whereas actually, it's got to be tweaked for the individual and appropriate for them, rather than a generic sort of template for everyone.
I think that's some of the issues that people come into the gym with. Like, I had a big fear of going into the gym and lifting with people just in general. I have my own gym in my house, which is great. I'm lucky to be able to do that. But going to gyms, and especially when you walk into a gym and Ben has a camera crew with him, and you're in a meathead gym that's like all bodybuilders.
So again, funny story. We'll wrap it up with this. So Dave obviously said that he speaks on the news. So essentially, I was over, and the night before he was on the news, and I was in the waiting room, and I was like, he's doing this thing on the news, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, it's Dave, like, that's crazy. And then the very next day, we arrived at the gym, and I had obviously two guys with cameras, and he's like shy and like freaking out and everything. It's like, how can you be so confident in this one situation where you're speaking in front of millions of people, but then you're in a gym, you're like, oh, what time are they going at? Like, is this okay? Like, am I? What? And that person's like, it was just like out of your comfort zone beyond belief. Yes. But you got much better the second time around.
I did. Yes. But I think it's due to the kind of conceptions around people in the gym around, hey, you're not doing this right, or, hey, you're not able to bench a certain amount of weight. I like what Joey Swoll does online about critiquing like proper gym etiquette and stuff like that, but more of a positive culture in the gym where it's like that person came to that gym to better themselves, and they may just be starting on maybe their first day ever lifting in their entire life. And, you want that to be as much of a positive experience for that person as humanly possible, so that they continue to come back and they continue to make themselves better and healthier and live longer, and I think that's the big thing that I always feared, was going into the gym and someone's to be like, oh, you can only bench, 200. Okay. That's we, like, it's just the misconceptions, I think, that you think of going into the gym, of a lot of folks that just have kind of an ego, or, maybe had a bad experience going to a gym at one point in time, or unsolicited form feedback, so, I think
you can tell that this really pisses Dave off. Anyway, we'll wrap it up because we're coming up the time. James, you want to let anybody know where they can find you if they want to find you, find out more information and stuff like that?
So generally everything's on Instagram nowadays. I'm not on Twitter, not really any other platforms.
What?
It's just James Sutton Coaching on Instagram. You'll see a lot of exercise mechanics based educational content there, and then just bragging about how good my clients look. Really.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming. Appreciate obviously the time, and it's a conversation I've been looking forward to having. I know that the listeners have been looking forward to it too. Dave, do you want to do your usual roll up, and then? Yeah,
well, I just want to say, James, thanks so much for finally getting to meet you and putting a face to the name. And I've seen a lot of your videos already, and I feel like I already know you from everything that Ben has said. But thank you for coaching Ben, and for distilling knowledge for him as well, because it comes down equally to all of us, and we continue to, like, whenever he learned some new way of putting us through pain. Because he went through some pain, he puts it down to us. So thank you for all the pain that you inflicted on us throughout the time. But no, thanks everybody for hopping on to the Hacking Your Health podcast. If you have friends, folks, family that you can share this with, that'd be great. We always appreciate the community that we're doing, and you can always find us on Spotify, Apple Music, and everywhere else that podcasts are available. So really appreciate the community and the folks and the positivity. We'll be back again next week. But James, thanks again for coming on today. I really appreciate it. Learned a lot.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.